Premiering on Netflix in October 2025, Winx Club The Magic is Back is the first official reboot of the beloved Winx Club franchise. The keyword there is official, because unofficially, this technically qualifies as the fourth reboot the series has had. This poor show has been chopped and changed so many times that the creators had no choice but to start from scratch because frankly, I'm not even sure they're 100% sure what's canon at this point. Hi, I'm Sasha, and I like to take deep dives into childhood media in order to escape the horrors of adulthood. I'm 27, which according to the internet means that I'm already 1 foot in the grave. But more importantly, it means I've been around to experience the entirety of Winx Club from start to end to now rebirth. I love this series. If you made a Mount Rushmore of my childhood, Winx Club would be the George Washington or the Alexander Hamilton. I actually have no idea who's on Rushmore, but the point is that this series is something I hold near and dear to my heart. Which means, like many fans, I am very wary of this reboot, especially because they historically have not been the best for this series. Well, except for one. We'll start at the most logical place, the beginning, which, shockingly, is not 2004, because the original series we all know and love is actually itself a reboot. The first rendition of Winx Club was created by Italian cartoonist Eugenio Straffi in the late 90s, and was originally titled Magic Bloom. Straffi felt that there was a gap in the representation of female heroines in cartoons and sought to create a series that would help mend this. The pilot episode of Magic Bloom and any other footage that may have been created for the series is considered lost media. But in recent years, Straffi has shared original concept art on Instagram, and some footage of the original series has been shared at conventions. Not much information is available about the plot of the original series, but it stands to reason that the first season would more or less follow the same storyline that season 1 of Winx Club did. After 12 months of development and an investment of over €100,000, the pilot was brought to test audiences. Allegedly, the overall reaction to the show was positive, but the audience was not a fan of the outdated-looking fairy transformations, which were heavily inspired by medieval fairy tales. Investors were ready to greenlight the series for a premiere in spite of this, but Straffi wasn't happy with the audience reaction and insisted on doing a redesign of the characters. To make sure he did it right this time, Straffi enlisted the help of Italian fashion designers to modernize the fairies, resulting in the iconic Y2K aesthetic that we know today. Somewhere during this process, the decision was made to do complete redesigns for Flora, Musa, and Riven. Riven's original design was a bit more villain-esque, which I'm not mad at, but I'm glad they went for a more nuanced look since he is more of a morally gray character. Flora and Musa were most notably white in their original character designs. You can tell that they kept some of the original elements of Flora's design, but Musa was basically recreated from scratch. The decision to add some diversity to the cast would prove to be a good one, as it no doubt helped the series gain the major international appeal that it now has. One more change that I have to note is that Stella's name was originally Sasha. As a Sasha myself, this is extremely exciting to me, but also surprising because Stella literally means star in Italian, and I can't think of a better name to represent our shining beauty. With the redesign complete, this brings us to 2004, when Winx Club officially premiered. The show was an instant success, with massive appeal to its target audience of viewers aged 4 to 14. The series, of course, originally premiered in Italy, in Italian, but would soon be dubbed in several other languages, including French and English. But there were actually 2 English dubs that were created. Because in the US, exclusive broadcast rights had been obtained by 4Kids TV, who decided to create their own dub. Straffi apparently wasn't a big fan of the choices that were made for this dub because they actually changed a lot of the dialogue in the first 2 seasons, making it closer to a rewrite than an actual dub. Now, I'm biased because this is the version of the show I grew up watching, but I love this dub. I know people are going to hate on me for not hating the 4Kids dub, but if it wasn't for this dub, I may never have gotten into Winx Club in the first place, so there's no way I could hate it. In my opinion, it has the best voice acting, and other than the seemingly pointless character and planet name changes, from what I've seen online, most of the major changes seemed fairly reasonable in terms of making the show more appropriate for children, based on American standards. From what I can tell, the only major plot change that didn't make any sense was the decision to no longer have Daphne and Bloom be sisters. It didn't really serve a purpose and created a major plot hole when Bloom looks at her family tree later in the series and Daphne is listed right alongside her. I totally understand the criticism surrounding the fact that this dub made a lot of changes largely for the sake of westernizing the show for its American audience. However, Straffi has made it very clear that he wants the show to be as big in the US as it is in Europe, and he cited cultural differences as one of the major reasons why the show isn't as big. So, with that in mind, I understand why 4Kids would take some of the liberties that they did, especially with stuff like jokes that don't translate well to English. Now, putting the behind-the-scenes details aside for a second, let's focus on the series itself. Similar to the plot of an anime, which Straffi has cited as one of the inspirations for the series, Winx Club was a series that followed a major overarching plot each season and throughout the whole show, meaning it was intended to be watched in chronological order. Unlike other cartoon series like SpongeBob, it wasn't created with the intent of having infinite episodes that could be watched in any order. While we would of course witness the growth and changes of all the characters in the show, the main plot centered around Bloom, a fairy from a lost planet who is the holder of the Dragonfire, one of the strongest powers in the magical dimension. She grew up on Earth to adoptive parents who had no idea that she was magical. From the very inception of the show, Straffi intended for the series to have a 3-season arc during which we follow Bloom on her journey of discovering her past and her powers. And that's exactly what the original run of the show gave us. 3 great seasons where the girls grow up and achieve the final evolution of their fairy forms. The season 3 finale ended on somewhat of a cliffhanger where Bloom states her next goal is to find her birth parents. This would be followed up with a movie in 2007, Winx Club: The Secret of the Lost Kingdom. This movie would pretty much wrap the series up with a nice little bow. In it, the girls all graduate and officially become guardian fairies of their home planets. Then they manage to help Bloom free her parents and her home planet from a curse that essentially left everything frozen in time, and the movie ends with Bloom and Sky getting engaged after 3 years of dating. Happily ever after, right? Wrong! Because if there's anything in this world that's more motivating than creative freedom, it's money. Despite stating in 2007 that the series was not meant to go on forever, implying that the movie was supposed to serve as the series' official finale, Straffi would backtrack only a year later and announce that the production of season 4 of the show was underway due to its popularity. Now, season 4 of the show did contain a few major plot holes, including the addition of more fairy transformations after stating Enchantix was the final fairy form, and the extremely confusing timeline of when magic left Earth. Because somehow Queen Morgana has a human husband and an 18-year-old daughter while also being imprisoned for hundreds of years. Despite this, the season was generally well received by fans. Season 4 premiered in 2009, which is 6 years after the show's original premiere date. Meaning its original audience was now all 6 years older, and the majority of them were now in middle school, high school, and even full-blown adulthood. And the writing of this season adjusted accordingly. The girls were now all graduates of the Althea College, and throughout the season we see them discussing their futures, starting a business, and several of them get engaged. This season even had the first death of a major character. Being the first and only season without the Tricks as the girls' major rivals, it also gave a sense of growing up as they no longer had familiar enemies. Had this been the final season of the show, it would have served as a nice epilogue, showing that, just like the audience, the girls have grown up and are on to new adventures, but will always be a team. But alas, we were not lucky enough to have that be the case. This brings us to our next reboot, the Nickelodeon era, or as I like to call it, the beginning of the end. If you've ever been a fan of a popular TV show, then you more likely than not have experienced watching a really great series slowly deteriorate as more seasons go on, because it becomes very apparent that the writers did not anticipate the series continuing for such a long period of time and are clearly running out of ideas. Pick pretty much any TV show that had 7 or more seasons, and you'll notice this decline usually starts to happen after seasons 3 or 4 of the show. And Winx Club was sadly not an exception to this. However, the cause was not the writers running out of ideas. It was the fact that the show was given an entirely new team of writers. And my god, does it show. Strap in, because this section is going to be a long and messy one. Now, season 4 of Winx Club didn't air in the US in 2009 alongside the rest of the world because by this time, Rainbow had revoked 4Kids TV's broadcasting rights, meaning the show no longer had a US distributor at the time. That is until 2010, when Rainbow announced its new partnership with Nickelodeon. This partnership not only gave Nickelodeon broadcasting rights for Winx Club throughout the majority of the world, but also surrendered part of the creative process to the studio. The deal included the creation of 2 more seasons being produced with input from both Rainbow and Nickelodeon, with Nickelodeon having the final approval over each episode. When Winx Club first premiered on Nickelodeon, it was in a weird position because internationally, the series was already known in many countries and already had 4 seasons out. And with the goal of this new partnership being to continue the series with broader reach, it didn't make sense to force the rest of the world to wait for several years to get to the 5th season, while the US caught up on the first 4. To fix this, Nickelodeon premiered the show with 4 TV specials that summarized the first 2 seasons, followed by the next 2 seasons in full. While the specials were well received, as you can imagine, certain plot points and character arcs had to be cut for time. Season 2 seemed to suffer the brunt of this, which makes sense since that entire season was literally centered around character development. These specials, along with seasons 3 and 4, were re-recorded using the new cast of Hollywood voice actors, including several Nickelodeon alumni. Initially, Nickelodeon put a ton of effort and money into marketing the show, leading to the premiere of the specials being a huge success. So, at first glance, this seemed like a pretty ideal fit. Nickelodeon has massive global reach that would majorly benefit Rainbow, and it was known as the edgier network compared to its direct competitor Disney Channel. This makes sense for a show like Winx Club, which has tackled slightly more mature subject matter since the very beginning. However, the team members Nickelodeon brought onto the project had experience with shows like The Backyardigans, Blue's Clues, and Wonder Pets. While these are all iconic and majorly successful TV shows in their own rights, they all noticeably have a preschool-aged audience. And this wasn't just reflected in the show's writing. Instead of the primetime evening spot the show was initially given, new episodes premiered in the middle of the day on weekdays when anyone over the age of 5 would more likely than not be in school. As a side note, I actually didn't even realize Season 5 of Winx Club existed until several years later because that's how little marketing went into it, even though I was well aware of the specials premiering on Nickelodeon. In fact, by Season 7, the show was officially moved to the Nick Jr. channel, leaving no mystery around the fact that the show was now clearly intended for preschoolers. As with the previous dub by 4Kids TV, several changes were made to the dialogue and plot with the Nickelodeon dub. While the 4Kids dub is largely criticized for some of the tonal changes it made to the show, many fans agree that the Nick dub and subsequent writing changes made the show practically unwatchable. Now I have to stop and point out the irony for a second, because while Straffy has publicly criticized the 4Kids dub for being too childish, he has yet to make any sort of public criticism towards the Nickelodeon dub for doing pretty much the exact same thing. Although, when the president of Nickelodeon International is a member of your company's board of directors, I guess it's probably best not to say anything negative. Even before Season 5 premiered, there were signs that the show was experiencing a tonal shift. For starters, Aisha and Naboo's engagement is completely removed from Season 4. And while it was also heavily implied that season that Stella and Brandon also got engaged, this would of course never be confirmed in future seasons. In the original dub, when Naboo dies in Season 4, it is explicitly stated that he was basically put into a deep sleep for hundreds of years, implying that he's not actually dead. Given that this season was written way before Nickelodeon's involvement, it's reasonable to assume that if Season 5 had been solely handled by Straffy and Rainbow, it would have at least partially centered around the Winx trying to find a way to break the spell he was put under. Instead, they introduce what is clearly intended to be a new love interest for Aisha in Season 5, and she is understandably standoffish towards him as she grieves her late fiancé. Or her forever boyfriend, as Nickelodeon called him. This would unfortunately be the last mention of Naboo or really anything remotely mature in the show. Oh, I should also mention that instead of Daphne being a trapped spirit who died saving her sister and the dragon fire, Season 5 made the reason for her situation be the Curse of Cyrenix, so she's not actually dead. In fact, they literally bring her back to life at the end of the season, completely undermining the major sacrifice she made for her family and the entire magical universe. But hey, who cares? The writers certainly didn't. And they made it very clear with this plot point that they were going to play fast and loose with the story lore as they saw fit moving forward. Even though the girls graduated at the end of the 3rd season, for some reason they go back to Althea in Season 5 and just never really leave. Because when you've saved the universe on multiple occasions and are literally granted the title of Guardian Fairy for your home planet, there's obviously nothing better to do than hang around your old high school forever. In Season 6, the girls' casual outfits are literally changed to school uniforms. For what reason? They're not even supposed to be students anymore. Season 5 was also pretty much the last season to acknowledge the girls' unique aesthetics and individuality, as their clothing in the following seasons would noticeably become more identical, to the point of just being one outfit in 6 different colors. It's crazy to me that Strophe would agree to this when he literally scrapped Magic Bloom in order to make the outfits more stylish. Basically, half of seasons 5 through 7 also take place on Earth for some reason, and it's not to follow up on anything from season 4. To be frank, it just seems like lazy writing. Instead of continuing to build up the massive magical universe that the story has always taken place in, the writers chose to stick to the familiarity of Earth, because, small children, many of whom have way more creativity than the average adult, are certainly not capable of imagining anything beyond the confines of planet Earth. So, as you can imagine, this laundry list of changes that came with the Nick era led to a shift in audience. The show lost its popularity with the majority of its original fanbase, who now found the show to be too childish, and gained popularity with very young fans who likely would have found the original plot of the show hard to follow for their age. Many fans don't even consider anything beyond season 3 or 4 to be canon, and I don't think anyone can blame them. Going back and reevaluating everything again, it almost feels like season 5 of the show was written to send the message of either deal with it or leave to existing fans of the show, since it was clearly a transitional season. And just in case things weren't confusing enough for you, I have to briefly mention the mess that was the second Winx Club movie, Magical Adventure, which released in 2010 and premiered in the US in 2013. However, production on the film began way back in 2007 before the movie had even been released. If you watch the movie, it's pretty freaking clear that it was written before the events of season 4, and that it was probably supposed to be released before it as well. But for some reason, the Winx girls all had their Believix transformations that they earned in season 4. That itself wouldn't be too off-putting. Maybe they changed it so that this takes place after season 4, except there's one glaring issue. Naboo, who died in season 4, is in this movie, despite his bizarre absence from the first movie. And since there's no logical point in season 4 where the gang could have all taken a months-long break to return to their home planets before his untimely death, there's no logical point in the timeline where this could have taken place. So what the heck happened? Now, I couldn't confirm this for certain, but the rumor is that the girls did originally appear in their Enchantix forms and that this was supposed to take place before the events of season 4. But allegedly, the higher-ups wanted to push the sales for the newer Believix dolls and made the studio change the character designs. Now, that's only a rumor, but it sure would explain the bizarre change. The plot centers around Bloom and Sky's engagement from the end of the first movie, so I'm surprised they even aired it on Nick since they seemed pretty determined to remove as many elements of adulthood as they could. I remember watching the first 2 Winx Club movies during the pandemic, and this was yet another moment that showcased the drastic decline in story quality. The first movie is emotional and high stakes, and as someone who had just been forced to graduate college in her parents' living room, Bloom's sense of feeling lost after graduation struck me on a very personal level. And the second movie has none of that. Nothing about it stuck with me. And similar to Nickelodeon's writing choices, they basically just had to make up new lore in order for the movie to exist in the first place. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised that something with such a boring title would have an equally boring story. At least the soundtrack slaps, though. I just know that Strophe from 2006 would be kicking and screaming if a network tried to change the story of Winx Club as much as Nickelodeon did. Maybe he just no longer cared after season 4 since he already told the complete story that he set out to tell, or maybe he just couldn't let go of the series and decided he would rather have a shell of the original instead of nothing at all. But to be frank, I think the ultimate motivation was just money. Because despite all of these changes made during the 2-season contract, Strophe signed a deal for yet another season in partnership with Nickelodeon in 2014. Which makes a lot of sense when you have the knowledge that Viacom, Nickelodeon's parent company, was financing the show alongside the production of yet another Winx Club movie, and now owned 30% of Strophe's production company, Rainbow. Not only that, but Rainbow and Nick would continue to partner for the production of several more projects. So maybe Strophe, in the pursuit of other creative endeavors, decided to make Winx Club the sacrificial cash cow in order to finance where his new interests lied. But only he can say for sure. Season 7 of Winx Club premiered between 2015 and 2016, followed by several years of radio silence. But we are not out of the orange woods just yet, my friends, because in 2019, to the surprise of I think literally everyone, Season 8 of Winx Club premiered. Although I hesitate to call it that because this was clearly a brand new show. Before jumping into the details, I'll just get the elephant in the room out of the way. The art style changed completely. Now, I don't want to harp on it too badly because Lord knows I wouldn't be able to draw anything better than that, and I don't think it's objectively bad. Like, if a brand new cartoon came out with this animation style, I don't think people would hate it that much, but it is objectively a major downgrade from the original animation style. And to drastically change the character designs for a show after 7 seasons is nothing short of bizarre, especially for such an iconic property. They also drastically whitewashed all of the characters, especially Aisha and Flora. Even Stella, who is a white character with a natural tan, got whitewashed. I don't care what the reason was for this, because there will never be a good one. Unless it was done to remove harmful stereotypes, which to my knowledge this show didn't have, there's no excuse for removing diversity from a show, especially in this day and age. The cherubic-looking new character designs were done to appeal to the preschool audience that Straffi had now officially decided to commit to aiming the show at. Not sure why the whitewashing was necessary, though. I guess black children are a myth. But that, of course, wasn't the only change. Sadly, Rainbow got rid of many longtime crew members before making this season, including the art director Simone Borselli, who had been working on the show since the very first season. Apparently, Straffi took the majority of the writing and design staff over to his new passion project, Club 57, a live-action show that was being created in partnership with Nickelodeon. It only aired in Italy and Latin America, so if you've never heard of it, that's why. They may claim the reason for this was because they wanted to take the show in a new direction, as if they haven't already done that before, but I think the reality is that they just stopped caring about the show altogether. Season 8 was the first time since Season 4 that Nickelodeon was not directly involved in the creative process, as the Nick team moved to a consultant role. With creative control finally back in the hands of Rainbow, this could have been a really good sign that the show would finally have quality writing again. But as I mentioned, most of the original Winx Club creative team was gone, so the odds of it being anything like the original series was slim. And even more notably, Straffi himself wasn't even involved in the show anymore, in favor of focusing on the live-action Winx Club and his show Club 57. So basically everyone has abandoned ship at this point, including the captain. So why should the audience expect anything but a shipwreck? As for the season itself, the writing was simplified to suit its new younger audience. I never watched this season myself, but I saw several longtime fans who managed to stick around to the end of the series agree that the writing for this season was much better than it had been for the previous two. Although the bar for that was already so low that I can't exactly call that a glowing review. One extremely weird element about this season is that they decided to bring back fan-favorite transformations like Enchantix and Sirenix, but there was literally no point in doing so. Like, dude, the audience of 4-year-olds that you have now blatantly stated you are targeting don't care about nostalgia for previous seasons. They literally weren't even alive when the last season aired. If you're going to abandon your original fanbase for the sake of an entirely reimagined show, at least commit to it. Now, before moving on to the next reboot, I just have to rant for a second about some of the comments Straffi made in an interview shortly before Season 8's release. He stated that over the last decade, the audience for animation has skewed younger and that it's, quote, very difficult to get a 10-year-old to watch cartoons. I'm sorry, but I have to call BS on that. Just because kids stopped watching your cartoon doesn't mean they don't watch cartoons anymore, especially at the time when they decided to start shifting the audience for this show. Winx Club aired on Nickelodeon from 2011 to 2016 before its hiatus. For some perspective, other cartoons that aired during this time include Gravity Falls, Adventure Time, Regular Show, and Steven Universe, just to name a few. These are all shows that I know for a fact have large adult fan bases alongside the child audience. You can even argue that some of these shows had more adult fans than kids from the start. Also, many popular animes, which again were a large source of inspiration for Winx Club, did not have children as their target demographics when they were created. Of course, children are generally more likely to watch an animated show, but do you think the massive following anime has in modern society would be possible if it only appealed to children? He also claims that children aged 4 to 8 can't follow such complex storytelling, but again, I call BS. I mean, I was literally about 6 or 7 when I got into Winx Club, and I had no problem following the story. Just like how I didn't have any trouble following the story for Sailor Moon, which I got into at an even younger age. Sure, some things may have gone over my head, but I understood all the major plot points enough to enjoy the show. Straffi uses all of this weak reasoning to justify why the writing had declined so much over the years, claiming that despite fans being very vocal about their dislike for the writing changes, they had to do so. But I don't buy that for a second. Like, be so for real. Did the audience grow up and suddenly stop watching the show after 5 years of loyalty? Or did you start changing the writing to skew younger and drive all of the older fans away? 'Cause it kinda just seems like a monster of your own creation at this point. Was the issue really that the audience got too old to enjoy cartoons? Or was it really that they got too old to buy dolls and tickets to live action shows? Okay, rant over. Sorry if I went a bit off topic, but I came across this interview while researching season 8 and it just made me mad. So, with 2 decades behind us, we are now brought to 2025 and the reboot everyone on the internet has been mad about for the last year, Winx Club: The Magic is Back. Before the reboot existed, Rainbow actually intended to create a season 9 of Winx Club. But just like with season 8, this kept getting pushed back until it was finally put out of its misery and was scrapped altogether in favor of doing a reboot. In 2023, Straffi bought back the shares in Rainbow from Viacom, meaning that for the first time since 2009, Rainbow had full creative control over Winx Club again, without any input from Nickelodeon. Nickelodeon would maintain its relationship as a distribution partner for Rainbow, though I think it's fair to assume that Nick is no longer Rainbow's top choice as a distribution partner, given that this reboot is being distributed internationally on Netflix. While the official trailer was released in July of this year, footage of the reboot has been circulating since 2024, and it was immediately met with backlash and controversy. I think the biggest source of turmoil amongst fans has been the choice to have the reboot be completely CGI. And unlike the CGI used in the Winx Club movies, the characters aren't animated in a style that mimics the original. And even if it was, I'm not under the impression that Winx fans are particularly fond of the CGI segments used in seasons 5 and 6 anyway. So this decision naturally sparked backlash because the original Winx art style is hands down iconic. Even if you've never watched Winx Club, you would recognize the art style because no other cartoon looks like it. In the last year, they even took a page out of the Bratz playbook and made renderings of real celebrities in their original art style, no doubt in an attempt to connect with their older fans. While in theory, CGI should open up a world of possibilities in terms of detail and expressions, the new characters seem far less expressive than in the hand-drawn art from 20 years ago. Fan disappointment aside, the choice to do CGI over hand-drawn art immediately sent the message to fans that costs were being cut in order to make the reboot happen. And this sentiment was only made worse when fans started pointing out evidence of AI being used in the initial posters and concept art. Now, I don't know too much about AI, and I prefer to keep it that way, so I'm not going to dig too heavily into the subject, but there are videos here on YouTube and posts on Reddit diving into the evidence that AI was being used, and yeah, it's not looking too good, fam. AI is obviously a super controversial topic, but I feel like it's the most controversial in artistic spaces than anywhere else. So to have an animation studio go from hiring fashion designers just to get their character designs right, to now using AI when creating their character models, feels like a slap in the face to both artists and fans. This was reason enough for fans to boycott the new series, but there's also some simpler and less controversial reasons why existing fans might not be tuning in. Now, the reaction hasn't been all bad. Many fans have been cautiously optimistic that this reboot will return to the Winx Club's roots by having a cohesive storyline that follows consistent logic and doesn't have a blatantly obvious change in writers over the years. And unlike the whitewashing in Season 8, they also took a positive step in terms of diversity. Instead of long flowing hair, which, speaking from experience, is unattainable for most Black women, Aisha has her hair in a protective style for the first time ever, which has historically been pretty rare in kids' media. And while there has been some debate over the years about whether Flora is supposed to be Latina or not, Flora's new voice actress is herself Latina, and her voiceover for Flora has an accent reflective of that fact, leaving no room for argument about Flora's race. At the time of recording this, the series hasn't been released in the US yet, but it has been released in the UK. So my impressions are based on the trailers and the reviews of fans who have already seen the show. Although from what I've seen so far, my impressions from the trailers were pretty spot on. Some major changes we can see in the trailer include Aisha being a founding member of the Winx Club and the addition of new characters. So right away, this tells us two things. First, the reboot is obviously not going to follow the original storyline, even if it borrows elements from it. And second, this is less of a guarantee, but it indicates that character development for the original characters is either going to be speedrun or skipped over entirely. Because I doubt they will be able to effectively portray Aisha's feelings of being an outsider when she has a solid friend group from the very beginning of the series. While Rainbow is probably correct in their assumption that fans don't want to sit through 3 identical seasons of the show again in a cheaper looking animation style, I'm getting the impression that they've approached this reboot series with a reliance on fans' pre-existing knowledge of the characters. But if this reboot is supposed to serve as a retelling of the story, then that doesn't make sense to do. If this is being presented as a brand new story, then these should be approached as brand new characters. Now, the trailers and even the title, The Magic is Back, seem to lean into the idea that the series is largely for existing fans of the show. But more signs point to this reboot being aimed at kids, once again. For starters, the new transformations, which were released early in the promo process, seem to have a lot of giggling and jumping around, which seems to be in pretty stark contrast to the intention of the fairy form. Historically, the girls transform in situations that require them to fight, whether it's in a battle or for survival. Laughing and dancing doesn't really match the vibes for that. The second weird thing about the transformations is that the girls are wearing these ugly bodysuits for the majority of it. I get they want to avoid showing partial nudity, but there were several better ways to do that. For starters, they could just have the girls go from their day-to-day outfits straight into the fairy forms, which is what they did in season 1 of the original show. I get they may not be wearing these outfits every time they transform, but with 3D models, that should be easier to work around than 2D. Secondly, they could have done more close-up shots of the transformations in order to avoid nudity, like how they did in the original. But these new transformations seem more focused on the backgrounds than on the actual transformation, which is a choice. The new transformation song is also performed by Virginia Bocelli, and while she's incredibly talented, she's also only 13 years old. Not the choice I would make if I was trying to appeal to audiences of all ages. But of course, do you know what's a lot harder to sell without a child audience? If you said toys, you're correct. Because let's be honest, that's probably what this reboot is really about. Based on this picture from an expo, they already have at least 4 doll lines planned for release just for this season alone, and I'm sure that's not all of them. Rainbow also released a Winx Club game on Roblox, a gaming platform that is known for being very popular among children below the age of 14. Now, you can play Roblox at any age, and you can collect dolls at any age, but we need to be real about who the intended audience for these things are, at least in the eyes of Rainbow. In an interview earlier this year, Matteo Olivetti, Vice President of Licensing Sales and Strategy for Rainbow, stated that the goal of the reboot is to connect with a new child audience while strengthening their position with the existing fan base by creating a new show that has the essence of the original. Okay, so we didn't learn from the last time, did we? I'm not saying it's impossible to make a series that appeals to both adults and children. In fact, from a business standpoint, it's probably the smartest thing to do. There's a quote by Walt Disney about this exact topic where he points out that you're pretty much doomed to fail if your only target audience is children. After all, that's why it's called the family genre. But it's not an easy thing to do, and Rainbow has made it pretty clear over the last decade that they don't know how to do it. The live-action Winx Club failed to appeal to adults, and pretty much everything since season 4 has been aimed at kids, but has failed to make Winx as popular as it was with the previous generation. The most successful version of the show that appealed to all ages was the one about growing up, probably because literally everyone can relate to that. I don't understand why they keep doubling down on the idea that this is nothing more than a kids' show. Over the last several years, they've had collabs with Funko Pop, ColourPop, and multiple jewelry brands, and that's just in the United States. So they are fully aware that they can make a killing from the money of their adult fans alone. And if you scroll through the Winx Club Instagram account, with the exception of promoting the reboot, there's pretty much no acknowledgement of anything beyond season 4. This could be due to a licensing issue with Nick, but considering all of these collabs have been done using the character designs of seasons 1 through 3, I think this is a subtle indicator that they're well aware the majority of fans don't care for anything after season 4, and kids who grew up watching season 5 onwards clearly didn't grow that strong of an attachment to the version they got. Otherwise, they'd be trying to capitalize on those seasons as well. It's no secret that nostalgia sells, but I don't understand why Straffi and Rainbow insist on constantly having some version of this show air. Straffi already told the story he wanted to tell, so it's clear money is the main motivator at this point. Wouldn't it be easier to continuously sell the licensing to other companies so they can make money off of merch sales and leave it at that? It would be way less effort on their part, and fans would stop constantly feeling like a show they love dearly is being ruined. Rainbow has tried multiple times to make similar shows to Winx Club in the hopes of imitating its success, to no avail. And instead of using the funds they continuously make off of the Winx Club name to fund new creative endeavors that they're actually passionate about, they seem to operate on the mindset that they can't make money unless Winx Club is an actively running show. But when the creator's heart isn't in the show anymore, I don't think anyone wins. Time will tell if this latest reboot actually manages to breathe new life into the series, but based on the generally negative reception most reboots have gotten in recent years, and the red flags fans are already seeing, I'm not going to hold my breath. So there you have it, the entire history of Winx Club reboots. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. This video ended up being way longer than I thought it would be when I came up with the concept for it. At first, I thought I would just briefly touch on the changes from season to season, but when I started digging into why these changes happened, it ended up being way messier than I anticipated. And while it would have been easy to simply dunk on the changes and move on, I really wanted to get into the reasons behind them. Because much like a hero turned villain, major changes don't just happen without reason. So, what are your thoughts? Did you have any idea the Winx Club history was so long and complicated? Are you looking forward to the reboot, or would you rather watch the original 3 seasons and leave it at that? Have you watched every version of Winx Club that's been out? Let me know! If you liked this video, go ahead and subscribe for more childhood deep dives, and I will hopefully see you in the next one.